Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Here, Democratic strategist and host of That Trippi Show, and with me is the other Joe, celebrated journalist Joe Klein. Joe's been covering political campaigns longer than I've been running them. Sometimes we agree, other times not so much. And today we're joined by Congressman and Senate candidate Seth Moulton to talk about the war, conflict, targeted, limited combat operation in Iran. And first, a personal bias. I was very proud to have been a small part of Seth's winning campaign that helped him get to the House. Joe, why don't you take it from here?
Yeah, I have something of a bias too, because when I was embedding in Iraq and Afghanistan, I came to the conclusion that Seth's generation of veterans was going to be the next great generation of politicians. And I tried this theory out on David Petraeus, and the first name he mentioned was Seth Moulton. And of course, I wrote about him, and Seth, being Seth, got pissed off because I got something wrong. And I'm sorry about that, Seth. I'll try and do the right thing this week. But
you probably exaggerate things. I don't like it when people exaggerate. But I'm honored to have your support and your bias. However you want to put it. And thanks very much for having me on.
Well, yeah, we'll start with a quote, with my quote of the week. And Seth, I'm going to want your reaction to this. This was our commander-in-chief.
We have, right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that. We'll do it. Whatever somebody said today, they said, oh, well, if the president wants to do it really quickly. After that, he'll get bored. I don't get bored. There's nothing boring about this. Do you agree with that, Pete? I don't think there's anything, Mr. General. I think there's nothing boring about it.
Well, Seth, does that sound like a commander-in-chief to you? And number one, and number two, the great unanswered question is, why are we doing this? What's your theory?
Putting aside the fact that Trump is getting senile and it sounds like he's falling asleep, it doesn't sound like a commander-in-chief because he has absolutely no regard for these 6 Americans who have died. In fact, he recently said of the Ayatollah, I got him before he got me, as if that is enough justification for the war. And by the way, that deal, that trade is, I got him with 6 American dead, but he didn't get me. So Trump obviously thinks whatever remains of his life is more important than the lives of 6 young Americans with bright futures ahead of them. And yet this should be no surprise because it's well documented that Trump called us, people like myself, losers for signing up. My colleagues who got killed, suckers for dying. John McCain, a loser for getting captured. He's never had any regard for our veterans. He thinks of this as a video game, which is why he's talking about whether it's boring or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, why do you think he did it?
I have no idea. And the fact that he cannot explain that to Congress, to the American people, or most of all, to the troops he's asking to risk their lives for his war of choice, is just criminal on the face. I mean, as someone who's been asked to risk my life for my country before, the very minimum you want from your commanders is the truth. I mean, you might not even agree with their rationale, but you can't get the truth from this guy because he changes his mind every minute. I mean, the foundation of this war, much like Iraq, is on a lie about nuclear weapons. You know, there was no WMD in Iraq, even though that's why Bush justified going to war. Well, clearly we did not obliterate the nuclear program in Iran because here we are just months later attacking it again. So in both cases, the administration was lying about nuclear weapons as a justification to go to war. But we've also heard from Trump, it's about regime change. And then they came out and said it wasn't about regime change. We've heard it's about their nuclear program, but also about their ballistic program, their ballistic missile program. Then we heard it was about the oil. Trump was like, oh yeah, big mistake they made in Iraq. They didn't get the oil. Maybe it's about its oil. And hey, Mr. Trump, it's a good trade. Like, we'll get their oil in exchange for 6 dead Americans. He apparently thinks that's a good deal. The art of the deal right there. He even had a cockamamie theory, self-fabricated idea about some new conspiracy about how Iran influenced the 2020 election that he lost. I mean, this would be comical if there weren't dead Americans.
Right.
The point is, we have no idea why he started this war.
I want to get to the stat of the day. Sam, if you could put that up. Yeah, 2,923 days. That's between the day that Saddam Hussein was captured and the formal end to the Iraq war, just over 8 years. And so this whole thing about it'll be over in 4 weeks, we're going to be living with this mistake for a long time.
Well, there's a few different ways we could be living with it, just to be clear. I mean, there's no massive ground invasion right now, ground force invasion like there was with Iraq, but multiple officials, including the president himself, have not ruled out ground troops. So it's certainly possible that we put ground troops in, it doesn't go well or whatever else, and we're in some protracted kind of conflict. But let's say that they're trying to do this like Venezuela, even though it's a full-on war, not a very limited strike. Well, if this is their theory, if this is their strategic idea for how to contain Iran, we're going to be back here in probably less than a year. Because what do you think? They're suddenly going to say, oh yeah, you guys have bombed us like 7 or 8 times, but now's the time that we're not going to rearm. Now's the time that we're not going to rebuild our nuclear weapons program. Now's the time that we're not going to acquire a whole bunch of ballistic missiles or build them ourselves. We already know, publicly released, that Iran has been trying to buy carrier killer missiles from the Chinese. I mean, let's say we take out 20,000 of their ballistic missiles. 20,000, that's a lot. But then they buy 5 carrier killer missiles. They shoot 5 at an aircraft carrier. One of them hits, and several thousand Americans are dead. Was that really a good idea? I don't think so.
Well, as I think you know, Seth, I've spent some time in Iran, just as I spent some time in Iraq, and this is a very, very different place. It's a real country. Iraq was 3 different Ottoman satrapies that was held together by a dictator and binding tape. This is an ancient society and a very proud one. And people keep on asking, why aren't the Iranians in the streets? Why aren't they going to welcome us? Well, I'll tell you what. When I was on the streets in Tehran, I've never met an Iranian who didn't know what happened in 1953, which was the last time we overthrew their government. I think this is going to be very, very difficult to bring to an end. Obviously, there's been no phase 4 planning.
Yes, I mean, so there were 2 foundational mistakes with the war in Iraq. I mean, a lot of mistakes, but if you had to reduce it to 2, it was based on a lie about weapons of mass destruction. We already discussed that one. The second is that there was no planning for the day after. And when the administration cannot even tell us why we're going to war, different explanation every day, there's clearly no plan for what comes next. Hey, it's great that the Ayatollah is dead. And let's just get that out there. Let's say it loud and clear. This guy was evil incarnate. I am thrilled that he is dead. He killed tens of thousands of innocent Iranians, and he killed a lot of Americans as well. It's wonderful that he's dead. But what matters is what comes next. Because if the next regime is even more hardline, even more anti-American, even more anti-Israel, then we're not back to where we began. We're in an even worse place because of this. And if there's one way to seed the ground for a more anti-American, anti-Israel regime, it's to drop a bunch of bombs from Israeli and American planes. I mean, we have this amazing group of allies in Iran called the Iranian people who, in surprising numbers, actually really love America, at least until a few nights ago. But if they see their cities getting blown up, if they see kids in a girls' school getting killed by American bombs, they're not going to be very pro-American.
Seth, what do you make of the reports that CIA is working with the Kurds along the Iraq and Iran border to do some kind of, insurrection from the borders? Is any of this making any sense to you at all?
Well, they must be working with Kurds who don't remember their history, because the number of times that America has told the Kurds to come fight with us and then left them abandoned to get massacred by Saddam Hussein, by whatever other, by al-Assad, Bashar al-Assad, whoever murderous dictator in the Middle East of the week. I mean, I'm sorry, if I was a Kurd, I might love America. I'm very proud to be part of the Kurdish caucus here in Congress. I love working with the Kurds. I've visited them in Kurdistan and visited them with them very recently when they've come here. They should be our great allies, but the sad history here is that we've often left them hanging out to dry.
Let me ask you two questions, one about your colleagues and the other about your sense of where the military is now. In the last few days, there has been a lot of splashback onto Israel. Marco Rubio helped nudge this along by saying that we went to war to help them out. And then he did a 180 away from that. But do you sense that there is a growing anti-Israel tide in the Democratic Party, in the Congress? Is it going to have an impact on American politics?
Well, I mean, look, are there anti-Semitic elements in American politics? Yes, sadly there are, and there always have been. And although historically they've been rooted on the right, let's not forget that Marjorie Taylor Greene was the one talking about Jewish space lasers just a couple years ago. There are anti-Semitic elements on the left as well. But what I think you're really seeing is anti-Netanyahu. I mean, that's that a lot of people much more in the middle in Congress, not on one extreme or the other, are just really anti-Netanyahu. And to be clear about what Marco Rubio said, is he didn't just say we went to war to help our friend. He said they made us go to war. He said
right.
that the timeline was dictated by Netanyahu, not by the president. So here we are in Congress saying you violated the Constitution to make this decision to go to war on your own, Mr. President, which does, let's be clear, violate the Constitution. But actually, it turns out that President Trump didn't even make this decision completely on his own. What Rubio said is that he was forced into it by Netanyahu. I mean, that's how weak Trump is. So guess what? You're not supposed to go to war without going to Congress and having a debate before the American people. But you're sure as hell not supposed to go to war just because of peer pressure from an ally.
Right. The other question about the military is this. Well, first of all, it seems to me that that Donald Trump chooses his Joint Chiefs chairman by their nicknames. He liked Mattis's nickname, which was Mad Dog. And as you know, and I know, Mattis is not a mad dog. He's like a scholarly monk. And now he chose Dan Cain because his nickname was Raisin Cain. But Cain expressed, just before this started, some reluctance about this operation. And, I know that as a member of the Bipartisan Military Caucus, you guys keep close track of Pentagon spending, Pentagon procurement. Are we in any danger of being depleted?
Yes. And that's public, and I can't share anything classified about it, exact numbers. I just got briefed on this morning. Mm-hmm. But Cain and others have been public about this concern. And it's a very real concern, because not only do we need things like Patriot missiles to be able to protect our forces, our troops, our bases all around the globe, we need them to deter conflict. Because if China thinks they can launch a whole bunch of missiles at us and our allies in the Pacific in order to start a war over Taiwan, and we're not going to be able to defend ourselves, then they're much more likely to do it. So this impacts deterrence far beyond the Middle East. It's a much bigger problem than just whether or not we can shoot down the next 10 Shahed drones that come in and threaten to kill more American service members in the Middle East. It's a much bigger problem than that. And I know that there's a lot of skepticism in the Pentagon, in the broader military, and in the veteran community about this. I was just on the phone with a lifelong Republican veteran my age who said that he's watching many of his Republican friends just in a tailspin because they said, well, wait, I thought we weren't doing these wars in the Middle East. I thought we weren't starting wars of choice. President Trump was the first to come out and actually criticize Bush for going into Iraq, whereas Republicans before him had sort of just in lockstep supported what Bush did with the Iraq war. So, this is not America first. This is not president of peace. This is the antithesis of all of this. This is wars of choice started unilaterally by a president who dodged the draft when he was asked to serve in a war himself.
When we got really mixed up in Iraq, we went through a period of 2 or 3 years of stupidity and lost lives that needn't have been lost. You were there. You were in the initial invasion. And we didn't really come up with a strategy to bring it under control until your former boss, David Petraeus, came up with the counterinsurgency strategy. And my feeling, I was against that war, but once we were there, I felt that we owed the Iraqi people something. How do we get out of this one? Yeah. Or is it just too soon to tell?
Well, look, I haven't spoken to David Petraeus in the last 2 hours, so I won't speak for him, but we are in close touch. One of the most famous things that he said was at the very beginning of the war, in the middle of the invasion, before they had even reached Baghdad, when he looked at a reporter and he said, "Tell me how this ends." Well, I don't think there's anyone who can tell us how this ends in Iran.
The reporter was Rick Atkinson of the Washington Post, and apparently Petraeus said it as he went over the berm into Iraq.
I think it was actually in Najaf, so it was a bit further on. But in any event, wherever it was a very early comment. So he was very prescient in seeing where this was all going, although I imagine that he even himself could not envision we would be there 20 years later. But the point is that there's clearly no plan for what happens next here in Iran. And it's worth maybe for a second just going through all of the potential or purported justifications for this war. What about their nuclear weapons program? Because obviously we don't want Iran to have nuclear weapons. So maybe that's a good reason that we're going into Iran today. But they told us that they completely obliterated the program months ago. So were they lying to us then? Or have they not woken up to the fact that you can't bomb blueprints? And so at the end of the day, you need a diplomatic deal, not just to eliminate their program, but to prevent them from reconstituting it. And you can say the same about their ballistic missiles. So let's go through that justification, purported. Sure, we can take out a lot of their ballistic missiles, but what happens is what comes next. Because, okay, so they don't have a bunch of ballistic missiles tomorrow, but if a year or two from now, they have a lot of them. And maybe they even buy them from further afield because we have destroyed their production facilities, and they get much better missiles, then we're in a worse place. I mean, what if it is about the oil? Are we actually going to go in and occupy Iran so we can take their oil? I mean, that seems completely absurd. What if it is about regime change? Well, we already went through this one. What matters is what the next regime is. And if it's worse, then we're in a worse position. So you go through all of these purported justifications for the war, and even at that level, they don't make sense because there's no long-term plan. And that's the fundamental lie here. Not only do we not know why we're going in, but there's nothing here that makes sense in the long run, which means we're just starting a war that, whether it's literally boots on the ground or not, could very well be a forever war that just doesn't have an end.
Well, also, I mean, the regime change, I mean, the reasons themselves, preemptive war, regime change, we've done them. They have never worked. I mean,
Actually, it's a good historical fact that there's never been a successful war of regime change just from the air. And of course, there have been a lot of wars of regime change that include ground troops that also have not been successful.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the last one who thought he was going to be able to do it from the air was George H.W. Bush in the first Gulf War. And I had an Israeli source who told me right from the beginning, you'll do that for 3 or 4 weeks, and then you're going to have to send in troops.
Well,
and
I had an Iraqi friend who was probably 10 or 12 years old at the time, living in Hilla, south of Baghdad, in the Shia territory. And of course, Saddam was not only a violent, oppressive dictator, but he was Sunni. And so he was especially oppressive to the Shia population in southern Iraq. But H.W. Bush said, rise up. Rise up. We just defeated the Iraqi army in Kuwait. You should rise up back at home. And a lot of Iraqis thought that meant he was coming, that the Americans were coming. And so my friend recalls how everyone in his town ran out into the streets because they heard the helicopters coming. And they ran out of the streets and started jumping up and down and cheering, thousands and thousands of them in the city of Hilla. And then it turned out it was Saddam's helicopters that just started massacring them in the streets. Well, Trump initially said a few weeks ago that he would stop the Ayatollah from killing Iranian civilians. And this has not been reported very much, but the reason he did not, the reason he could not, is because his aircraft carrier was off the coast of Venezuela for a completely non-national security threat. Nowhere in the last 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, has Venezuela been anywhere near the top of the national security threats facing the United States. But because he had a personal vendetta with Maduro or whatever, because he still hasn't explained why we went in there. There've been 5 or 6 different justifications for that war of choice as well, even though it was a very short action, at least thus far. That's where our combat power was. So actually, there were a lot of Iranians who went into the streets a month ago trying to oppose this regime, trying to push for regime change. Trump said he would back them up, and he did not. And thousands of them were killed.
Well, we're coming to the end of our half hour here. Can I ask you a couple of quick political questions?
Sure.
I'll do them both together. And Joe, you can join in too. What do you make of what happened last night in Texas? And number 2, you are running for the United States Senate. You're doing a rebellious Seth Moulton sort of thing, running against an incumbent senator. Why are you doing that?
Democrats want change. And we want to get rid of Trump for the sake of our country. So a lot of Democrats are showing up and turning out in places like Texas that saw a historic turnout last night. But Democrats also want change within our own party. They want next generation leaders. They want people who are breaking the status quo, who are willing to go against the establishment. And what we saw last night, I think, was a reflection of what we saw at the end of last year. The 2024 was a terrible year for, 2024 and 25 were terrible years for Democrats in general. But at the end of last year, there were 3 big wins on the East Coast. Mamdani in New York, Sherrill in New Jersey, and Spanberger in Virginia. 2 of them, by the way, Serve America veterans, my organization, to flip seats from red to blue. Spanberger and Sherrill, I actually introduced them on the campaign trail when they were running for Congress as part of the historic class that took back the House in the first Trump term. In fact, Serve America candidates accounted for about half the seats we flipped. But here's my point with those 3 wins. They're in very different places on the ideological spectrum for Democrats. Spanberger is one of the most conservative Democrats who served in the House, and Mamdani obviously far away from that on the left. So what do they have in common? Well, 2 things. They're next generation leaders, and they're willing to challenge the party establishment. That's what we need in our party. That's what we need to win. That's what we need to fight Trump more effectively. And that's what my Senate race is all about. And I have a lot of respect for Senator Markey. He's been serving our Commonwealth for the last half century. In fact, there's only one member of the entire House or Senate who's been serving in Washington longer than him, and that's Chuck Grassley of Iowa. You know, Markey's been elected longer than I've been alive, and we should honor him for that service, and we should thank him for that service. But there comes a time to pass the torch, and the time is now, when clearly the old playbook, the Democratic establishment, is not working. It's gotten us a second term of Donald Trump. He's hurting a lot of people all across America. So I think why people are interested in my race is it kind of epitomizes this debate about the future of the Democratic Party. And that really matters for our success in the midterms.
Well,
Great.
I think a great place to wrap the show. Seth, thanks for being with us and joining on short notice like this. And I know you got to get going to your next thing, but thank you so much.
No,
Joe?
I'm honored to be on, and thank you so much for so thoughtfully continuing the conversation.
Great. Thank you. So is that us? We're left. Is Seth gone?
Yes, that's going.
Well, that was a hostile interview.
I'm still live. I don't know
Right.
if Sam's wrapped us yet. But anyway, folks, we'll be back next week. Hopefully we can find a guest on short notice like Seth, who literally with maybe an hour's notice agreed to come on and be with us today. So thanks a lot, all. Take care. We'll see you next week.
Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.